In the last 6 months, I've been able to make over $10,000 with my desktop CNC machine in my basement. So a little background on my experience. I purchased this Shapeoko CNC machine 2 years ago. I don't have any prior experience before that. I'm all self-taught here on YouTube. So let's jump right into it. All right, number one, I've invested money into things that have made me money. I can't tell you how critical this is to my success. I see all the shops out there. There's some beautiful shops. I want all the tools myself, but it's really critical that I prioritize in buying things, investing into my shop and things that return monetarily. Now, there's a lot of things that go into that. Everything can make you money. Everything can save you time, but prioritizing a list from top to bottom. I've upgraded the Z-axis to the HDZ. I've purchased the bit setter. Other than that, it's a completely stock machine, the Shapeoko XXL. Number two, designing items that are easily replicable. What I mean by that is I try to specialize not in individual custom orders with V-carving and stuff like that. I want to design myself unique and custom items and learn how to replicate them. It's a trade-off. You can get more money for individually custom items, but you can't produce as many of them. So my goal was to find sales channels where I could create unique products on a higher volume scale. So I had to ask myself, is the time for completely custom individual pieces worth the payoff? And for me, it wasn't. I can make more money and sell more items when I design and produce and replicate a particular item. All right, number three, I have all my layouts for the CNC machine exactly the same for a particular item. So I mill those items down to a certain size, so then it's just plug and play. Each piece is a certain size, so I don't have to re-zero anything in between pieces. So I know exactly how many items I can get from a certain size piece of stock. Number four, which is kind of like 3A, but is super important, is milling stock ahead of time. So I usually buy rough cut lumber and I mill it down myself to my certain dimensions, like I mentioned, but I do that ahead of time. So before I have an order, I'll have stock in piles ready for my next order. Now, I recently started buying stock that's already milled. A little more expensive, but it takes less time. So there is a balance there. Another thing that I like to do is mill stock for the next day. What I mean by that is if I run through all my stock at the end of the day, the last thing I want to do in the morning is mill more stock to get the CNC running. So I like to have at least a few pieces, maybe an hour worth of cut time to keep the machine rolling. Number five is dialing in feeds and speeds. Now, like I said at the beginning of this, I am no expert. Some people watching this are gonna have a lot more experience than I do. So I have my speeds for my certain items dialed in now, and they're ever evolving. One thing I like to do with feeds and speeds is a roughing pass and then a finishing pass, especially on my wooden trays. This limits the amount of sanding I need to do down the line. So I'll do a roughing pass at a faster, larger step over, and then I'll leave about a 1/16 of an inch for a finishing pass, and I'll tighten the step over to like 0.04. And that gives me a very, very smooth finish and very limited hand sanding on these trays. All right, number six. Something that I think is easily overlooked is having adequate dust collection. Now, my dust collection system is always a work in progress. Actually, last week I modified it again to make it better. But having shop vacs, having a central dust collection system, having enclosure, and having some way to keep that clean is super important. All right, number seven is having backup CNC parts and end mills. I think this is an easy one to overlook too. But if you have a V-wheel fall off and get ran over by your ball end mill, which I had happen last week, then it's important to have another V-wheel on hand. So luckily I did, but if I didn't, I would have been down for 2 days, and that just delays the time that it takes to produce these things. All right, number eight, think about your end product and work backwards to optimize. What I mean by that is picture what you're making, what you're designing, in the end user's hand. If you can do something ahead of time, whether it's in design, whether it's in the location of tabs, whether it's in a roughing and finishing pass, I always like to think about how something is going to be used, or what if I'm going to have to do later, if it's going to save me time or work better. All right, number 9, keeping your products to 2 different wood species. I think this is really important because sourcing material can be difficult. And when you have all these, so when you make these things, you're going to have all these requests from people. Hey, can you make this out of cherry? Or hey, can you make this out of this and make this out of that? So you have to think about, you have to find that stock, you have to buy that stock. Hopefully it's good stock. I've ran into issues where I've bought walnut that wasn't dry. And the reason I say 2 is pick a dark wood and a light wood. Now, most people aren't going to care really what it's made out of. That's a general statement. So I think we can all relate to this. Giving people fewer options makes them more inclined to make a decision to purchase one of them. If you give them 10 options, they're going to get overwhelmed and be like, oh, I don't know. And it's just so much work on the back end, it's not worth it. So I limit my designs to 2 colors, 2 different kinds of woods, walnut and maple. All right, number 10, clamping techniques. Now, I've gone through a bunch of different clamping techniques, and I've broken bits on clamps. I've done so much. What I do is I've installed stop blocks on the X and Y axis, and that keeps my zeroing point consistent. So everything is off the bottom left corner from this point that these 2 stop blocks create. And then when I mill all my lumber down to the specified sizes, it's all just rinse and repeat. All the Z height's the same, everything is the same. I found the peace of mind, so clamps don't break loose, double-sided tape doesn't break loose. I screw directly into my wasteboard. You'd be surprised. I mean, I've created hundreds of trays this way, and it works for me. So I think if you're going for more precise milling operations, this tactic wouldn't work, or metal wouldn't work. In that sense, you'd have to use some clamps. So I do have T-track, I do have inline clamps, I do have those things, but you know, it's easy just to go. And I drill a pilot hole in the 2 ends of my stock and zip some screws in it, and we're going to town. And since everything is exactly laid out, I know I'm not going to hit the screws. So those are my top 10 things that I've learned. And I would love to hear from you guys. If there is anything that's applicable that I could do better, please tell me down in the comments, because I am constantly revising and coming up with better ways and more efficient ways. So I encourage you, if something like this is your goal, to invest in things that make you money. That'll wrap up this one. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, but don't go anywhere. I've got a lot of other videos here for you to check out, and I think you'll enjoy. I'll see you in the next one.